They laughed at her in the parking lot. Not behind her back. Not in whispers. Right to her face in the middle of the afternoon, in front of a dealership that had her name on the service appointment she'd made 3 weeks in advance. The service manager, a heavy-set man with a sunburn and a laminated badge that said Trent Kolowski, Senior Advisor, looked at Willa Fontaine, standing beside her 2019 Land Rover Defender, and did something she hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked at the car first. Then he looked at her, and his whole face shifted like he'd made a calculation that didn't add up. "You sure you're in the right place, ma'am?" Willa was 51 years old. She had natural gray running through her locks, reading glasses folded in the breast pocket of her linen jacket, and the kind of stillness that comes from having survived things most people never have to. She looked at Trent Kolowski for a moment without saying anything. "Service appointment," she said. 3 o'clock. Fontaine. He typed something, looked at the screen, typed again. He tilted his head. "This vehicle is registered to Fontaine Mechanical Group?" "That's correct. You're with the company?" Willa took her sunglasses off and folded them into her pocket beside the reading glasses. "I am the company." He didn't believe her. She could see it the way you can see weather coming. Something settling into his eyes, a decision being made. He called over a younger technician named Brock, who had grease on his knuckles and a gap between his front teeth, and they had a brief exchange in voices too low for Willa to make out entirely. What she caught was probably fleet vehicle, and double-checked the paperwork. She stood in the parking lot in the July heat and waited. Here's what Trent Kolowski did not know about Willa Fontaine. He didn't know that she'd started her career as a licensed diesel mechanic at 22, working fleet maintenance for a regional trucking company out of Charlotte. He didn't know she'd gone back to school at 34 while raising 2 kids alone, earned her master's in mechanical systems, engineering, or that she currently held 6 patents related to hybrid drivetrain diagnostics, 2 of which were licensed to manufacturers, whose logos were probably on vehicles sitting in that very lot. He didn't know any of that. What he knew was what he saw. And what he saw, apparently, was not what he expected to see next to a $40,000 vehicle at a luxury dealership on a Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta. The appointment was about a persistent fault code in the Defender's terrain response module. 3 different shops had looked at it. 2 had cleared the code and handed the car back like the problem was solved. It wasn't. The 3rd had told her she needed a full module replacement at a cost of $4,000. Willa had her doubts. She'd brought it here because this dealership had a master-certified technician on staff, a man named Garrett Pulliam, whose work she'd read about in a trade journal. She wanted Garrett Pulliam specifically. That was in her appointment notes. What she got instead was Trent. "So, the thing is," he said, coming back to her with a clipboard, "Garrett's actually out today. Family thing. But we've got some guys who can take a look. When will Garrett be back?" A pause. "Tomorrow, probably. But like I said, our guys are fully. I'll wait for Garrett." Trent Kolowski's expression cycled through something, patience wearing thin. The clipboard came down to his side. "Ma'am, I understand you have a preference, but I can assure you our technicians are. I'll wait for Garrett," Willa said again. Same tone. Same volume. She went inside and sat in the waiting area and ordered a coffee from the machine near the window. A flat-screen television played a cable news segment on mute. Outside, through the glass, she could see Brock leaning against a pillar talking on his phone, occasionally glancing toward her car. The next morning she came back at 8. Garrett Pulliam turned out to be a compact man in his mid-40s, with close-cut hair, and the very deliberate way of moving that experienced mechanics develop. Every motion purposeful, nothing wasted. He shook her hand when she introduced herself, and said he'd read one of her papers on fault propagation in electronic control modules. He said it matter-of-factly, not trying to impress her. She liked that. Trent Kolowski was standing nearby when this happened. He didn't say anything. But she noticed the way he repositioned himself, slightly, like a man suddenly unsure where to put his hands. Garrett walked around the Defender with a flashlight and a diagnostic tablet. He plugged in. He looked at the readout for a long time without speaking. The other shops said module replacement, Willa said. I see that in the notes. Garrett zoomed in on something on the tablet. Did any of them check the terrain sensor harness at the rear differential? No. He nodded slowly. Not smugly. Just the nod of a man confirming something he'd already suspected. He crouched behind the rear of the vehicle and ran his hand along a section of wiring near the differential housing. He found it in about 4 minutes. A micro-abrasion on the outer sheathing of the harness, so small it was nearly invisible, causing an intermittent ground fault that was sending the system into a diagnostic loop. Not a module problem at all. A wiring problem. A $40 repair, properly done. Trent Kolowski had wandered over by this point, the clipboard back in his hands. It's the harness, Garrett said, standing up. He said it to Willa, not to Trent. Ground fault. Whoever told you module replacement either didn't look here or looked and didn't understand what they were seeing. Willa crouched and looked for herself. There it was. She'd been thinking harness for 2 weeks, but had deferred to the shops because. And she would think about this later. In the car. On the way home. Because sometimes you second-guess yourself when enough people in uniforms tell you you're wrong. How long to fix? She asked. Hour, maybe less. I can get to it this morning. She stood up and dusted her hands on her pants. Good. Trent Kolowski cleared his throat. Well, we'll have to work up an estimate, and there's the diagnostic fee, and Garrett, Willa said. What do you think the all-in cost looks like? Labor, plus parts. Probably $80 to $120. Depending on the harness section needed. Trent's clipboard went still. He looked at the number like it had personally offended him. Right, but there's still the multi-point inspection they ran yesterday. No one ran an inspection yesterday, Willa said. Garrett wasn't here yesterday. And no one else touched this vehicle, because I sat here and watched. A quiet fell over the service bay. One of the other technicians, a young woman in coveralls who'd been pretending to organize a tool chest 8 feet away, went very still. Trent Kolowski opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Well, he started. I'm going to go get another coffee, Willa said. Garrett, thank you. I'll be inside when you're done. She walked back through the glass doors without hurrying. At the coffee machine, she pressed the button for black, no sugar, and stood by the window while it dispensed. Outside, she could see Garrett already moving with purpose, laying out what he needed. He was good at his job. It was obvious in every motion. She felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but was close to it. The feeling of having been right about a person. What happened next, she didn't witness directly. She heard about it later, from Garrett himself, when he came in to let her know the car was ready. He told her that after she'd gone inside, Trent had said something to the young woman in coveralls. A technician named Rosalind Chu, who had been with the dealership for 3 years, and who, as it turned out, was not pretending to organize tools at all, but had been listening carefully. Rosalind had apparently looked at Trent Kolowski in the way that only a person who has been watching someone behave badly for a long time can look at them, and said, "That's Dr. Fontaine. She holds patents that your diagnostic machine uses. You might want to think about that." Garrett said he didn't know if that was strictly true. He didn't know the specifics of which diagnostic systems used which licensed technologies. But he said the look on Trent Kolowski's face in that moment was something he planned to remember for a while. When Willa came back out to get her keys, Rosalind Chu was at the service desk. Trent was nowhere visible. "Dr. Fontaine," Rosalind said. She said it without any particular emphasis, which was its own kind of emphasis. "Your vehicle's ready. Garrett's doing a final check now. Can I get you anything while you wait?" "I'm fine," Willa said. "Thank you, Rosalind." The young woman looked up briefly, a little surprised to be named. "I saw your work on the fault code issue," Willa said. "How long have you been in diagnostics?" 3 years here. 2 before that at a shop in Decatur. Are you certified? ASE Master Tech. Working on a 3rd manufacturer certification. Willa nodded. "You should look into the apprenticeship program at Fontaine Mechanical. We're expanding our diagnostics division. Pay is above market. Tell them I sent you." She took a business card from her jacket pocket and set it on the desk. Rosalind picked it up with both hands like something that might be fragile. "Yes, ma'am," she said quietly. Garrett brought the Defender around at 10:45. He showed her the section of harness he'd replaced, held it up so she could see exactly where the abrasion had been, where the fault had been generated. He explained it the way one professional explains something to another, directly, without simplification, without performance. Should hold indefinitely, he said. But if the fault code comes back, which I don't think it will, you call me directly. He handed her a card. Not the main desk. Me. She shook his hand. The bill was $97. She drove out of that dealership lot thinking about a few different things. She thought about the 3 shops before this one, and the $4,000 she hadn't spent. She thought about Rosalind Chu, and what it meant to be good at something in a room where no one was paying attention to you. She thought about the way certain rooms were organized, who belonged in them, who didn't, who got to decide, and how those decisions were so often made before anyone had said a single word. She'd been a black woman in rooms like that for 30 years. Professional rooms, technical rooms, rooms where the expertise was hers and the assumption was someone else's. She'd developed, over time, a very specific kind of patience. Not the kind that bends, the kind that waits. The terrain response module lit up green when she shifted into drive. The dashboard was quiet. The car moved the way it was supposed to move. 3 weeks later, Rosalind Chu called the number on the card and asked about the apprenticeship. And 6 months after that, after Rosalind had come in for interviews, had passed every assessment, had negotiated her own salary, with a kind of quiet confidence that reminded Willa of someone. Willa was standing in the bay of her own facility in Midtown Atlanta, watching Rosalind walk a junior technician through a diagnostic sequence on a fleet vehicle, explaining it with the same directness that good mechanics use, the kind that doesn't waste words. Willa had a meeting in 40 minutes and 4 emails to answer, and a contract review sitting on her desk. She watched for another minute anyway. There's a thing that happens when you've spent a long career being underestimated. Not everyone responds to it the same way. Some people grow hard. Some shrink. Some spend their energy fighting every individual instance of it, which is exhausting and never quite adds up to enough. Willa Fontaine had made a different choice a long time ago. She decided that the most effective thing she could do with the doubt other people carried about her was simply to keep moving, keep building, and, when she found people worth investing in, pull them forward with her. The smirk on Trent Kolowski's face in that parking lot had lasted about 30 seconds. What came after it? The girl with the tools and the certifications and the unspent potential, not $97 diagnosis that ended a problem 4 other professionals had misread. The moment Willa handed over a card and changed someone's next 5 years. That was going to last considerably longer. She walked back toward her office. Halfway there, she stopped and turned around. "Rosalind," she said. The young woman looked up from the vehicle. "Good explanation," Willa said. And then she went to her meeting.